And welcome to Dynaudio Unheard Container Studio, whatever you like to call it. It's a really, really cool spot we got here. Totally isolated from the rest of NAMM 2019, but it's super cool to be in here. We have air conditioning. Anyway, I'm here to talk about why we're using DPA microphones on every single instrument, on vocals, on guitars, on drums. Anything you can think of will be recorded in here with DPA microphones. DPA microphones started out as a measuring instrument microphone manufacturer. From Brinck days, the capsule was used to measure industrial stuff. But a couple of very clever guys, they found out that when they're using these microphone capsules on musical instrument, it sounds amazing. Actually, it sounds exactly like the sound source. So make the sound source be with you. Thank you, Ashley. He's credited for that, as his saying. Anyway, we started using these capsules on classical instruments, but over the years, it's been known to be a really, really good condenser microphone for any instrument you can think of. The first microphone that we used back then was the 4006, the legendary Brinck 4006. I just have to hold the door here. This microphone here, the DPA, it's now called DPA Danish Pro Audio 4006. And that today will be our room mic for these drums. It captures this very tiny room, but with a lot of good and very nice compression from Ashley, it makes the room sound really big, really umphy. That's fantastic. It's an omni microphone, pressure microphone, so we're not suffering from proximity effect. We're not losing low end from anything just because it's far away. It has the same amount of low end, high end, no matter how close we are, because it's an omni microphone, pressure microphone we call it. Anyway, Rune, hello. Take it away. Right. Let's hear what the drum sounds like, and I'll walk you through how we did it afterwards. Close the door. Rock on, Rune. Sounds fantastic. Let me just walk you through what we did and how we made it sound this incredible natural sound. We started out using two not omnis like this, but half omnis or wide cardioids. We call them 4015 wide cardioid microphones. We placed them as overheads, relatively close to the cymbals, and we used a microphone overhead technique that I will, from now on, ever refer to as the Ashley microphone.
The Ashley method?
The Ashley method. It's fantastic. I learned it yesterday, and I'm going to show you how we did it. Did we ever get a measuring cable?
We got some guitar cables out there we can use. It's nice because everybody's got a cable handy when you want to check phase on overhead microphones. You can just use a guitar cable, piece of string, anything you have lying around, just to make sure that the distance between those two microphones is identical to the snare drum. So that way when you listen to it in speakers, you're getting a time-aligned snare drum sound, which puts it in the center of the image. And that's really what we're looking for here. So take it away, Bo.
It works really well when you work with high-end microphones and you know that the sensitivity of the microphones, they are the same. If you don't know the sensitivity of your microphones, if you use like not measured microphone, calibrated microphones, you will probably end up with something like 6 dB difference between the two microphones. And then the distance is good, it's still in phase, but the level between the two microphones is not as equal as we're getting it here, because these two microphones, they are stereo matched, they are super aligned. So what we did, we started out with measuring the distance from rack tom to the microphone. That's this distance. And then Rune is holding that part of the cable, and we're going to the floor tom, move the cable, and someone moved it?
Yeah.
And the same distance. So the level of the two toms are the same in each microphone left and right. Then, as a second step to the snare, like this, I will hold the XLR end to the capsule, and Rune will tighten the cable and hold it to the center of the snare, so we get what actually is saying the same distance from both microphones to the center of the snare, like this. So the snare is now arriving at exactly the same level, because the two microphones have the same sensitivity, and exactly the same time, because the distance is the same. So the snare drum will be in phase and in the center of the stereo image if we pan the two overheads hard left, right. So that's our starting point. Let's hear that solo, the overheads, without anything else, just to hear the natural sound of the drums. And I have to remind you that we are not using EQs. Low cut, maybe, that's not an EQ today, at least.
I leave them flat. I want all the bottom from those overheads because it's such good bottom out of the microphone. And especially if you get in-phase bottom, that's what we're talking about with the snare drum. It's a transient. And that transient has to be in line. And it contains all frequencies. So when we start filtering out the overheads, that's because you don't have a good overhead sound. If you leave it full-bodied as you add the close mics in, it just reinforces that transient that's already in line. And that's when it works. That's when the overheads have so much of the sound. It makes my job easier when the overheads are awesome because I'm not fighting anything.
Let's hear it. Great. Thank you, Rune. And you can tell that the stereo image is really, really natural. It's like being in the room, like sitting in Rune's position. As Ashley told me, the stereo image is not like this. It's not in front of the drummer. That's not how we listen to drums. We listen to the drums more or less like this. We have the kick drum in the center, we have the snare in the center, and then we have the hi-hat over here and the ride over here. So it's not so much like the visual angle that we're going for, it's more like the audible angle. So it works really, really well. We want to close mic. You want to add anything to that?
The audible angle, I think that's a great term.
Okay, you can credit me for that.
He keeps on coming up with these great phrases. Yeah, the audible angle, it's not intuitive. Everybody visually wants to set up a drum set, but they don't think about how their ears are perceiving it. And once we've recorded it, we don't see the drummer anymore. As gorgeous as he might be,
we just have a nice picture of him.
Yeah, but hang the picture on the wall. So we want to hear it. We want the microphones to be positioned the way we hear it rather than see it. I guess that's
yeah.
The point.
And we know both that if we showed up at a TV show and we placed the overheads like this, we would have a producer, a video producer, and he would be on our back and say, well, again, you know, even in height.
He's like, you guys don't know what you're doing, do you?
Yeah.
We're like, oh, come on.
It doesn't look nice, but it doesn't have to look nice to sound nice, right? So we close mic everything. Of course, it's rock and roll. And the thing is that with this project here, the Unheard container, we don't know what we're meeting. We're meeting 16 bands over the next...
Something like that.
Yeah,
the
16 bands over the next 3 or 4 days. So we don't know what we're meeting. So it could be rock, it could be jazz, it could be experimental, it could be whatever. So we have to keep a flat EQ, we have to keep all options open, and we do that with these mics. So everything is close mic'd. We are starting with the snare. We are placing the snare in a very, very normal position, an inch over and about an inch in over the rim. We could take it out a bit further out, pointing it more towards the rim of the snare. Around the rim of any drum, we have all the overtones, the fast-moving transients on the outside of the drum. On the inside, in the middle of the drum, we have the lower tones. So if we want to have more brightness, we point at the rim, the edge, and if we have more low end, we point more towards the center of the drum. Opposite on the cymbals, where we have the low movements, the slow movements, the low frequencies on the outside, and then the high frequencies on the center. If you just think of it as the cymbal is suspended in the center, and the drum skin is suspended on the rim. So it's at the suspension, we have the fastest movements. So anyway, we will point this snare drum mic around the rim of the snare, pointed that, and we also have a microphone underneath picking up the snares to get that crispy sound, which the tom mic, snare drum mic doesn't pick up because it doesn't see, doesn't hear the reflections on the floor as everyone else hears.
And you always have to remember with the under snare drum mic, because it's pointing in the opposite direction from the over snare drum mic, the slower moving frequencies will cancel out. The low end will cancel out in those microphones. So what you do is flip the polarity, the electrical polarity of that bottom microphone, flip the phase, right? And then that gives you positive low frequencies from both microphones. So when you add them together, it's still punching as opposed to canceling out.
And be very, very observant that when you're using different types of microphones on the snare, that phase can be in phase or out of phase from birth. I've seen a lot of snares mic'd with a dynamic microphone on top and a condenser microphone at the bottom. And a condenser microphone and a dynamic microphone is per physics off axis, off phase 90 degrees just by how they work. So flipping the phase, you have to listen to it. You have to hear what Ashley is saying. Is it improving the phase response, or is it ruining the phase response? So you have to work with it. Here we have them opposite phase, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Cool. It sounds like
it's
this.
very obvious when you flip the polarity. It's like, whoa, the bottom totally drops out. When they're in phase, you flip the polarity and everything comes back immediately. It's very obvious.
Can you do it on the fly here?
Yes, we can. Okay, so right now we have the sound the way we've had it, the good sound, where I have the bottom mic is phase reversed. Okay, so just give us a bunch of snare stuff, and then I'll tell you when I flip phase. Okay, I'm going to flip the phase now. Now for me, the snare gets much thinner sounding, when you have just those two mics together. Okay, I'm going to reverse the polarity now. Now you get your low end back.
Fantastic. Super. I don't know if you noticed, but the hi-hat really sounds like hi-hat, even though we are listening to the snare drum. And that's one of the key things with working with linear microphones. Linear in the on-axis response, of course, most good microphones have that, but these are also linear in the off-axis response, meaning that they sound the same from the side of the microphone, but they are attenuated. It's picking up a lot less of the drums. Of course, we want a directional microphone. These are super cardioid microphones, so they are picking up 9 dB less in a 90-degree angle. That should be easy to remember. But it means that we have a natural hi-hat sound in the snare drum mic, and we have a natural cymbal sound in the rack tom mic. So blending the natural sound of the overheads with the natural sound of the rack tom mics gives us no phase issues. It doesn't give us any, it almost sounds like comb filtering sometimes. When you use dynamic microphones on the rack toms and you use condenser microphones on the overheads or different brands of microphones, they don't melt together the same way as these babies they do. So anyway,
thank you for that, by the way.
Yeah.
When a guy's a hi-hat basher, it's really hard to get a great snare drum sound because the hi-hats are just, a typical SM57 on a snare drum has sort of a gnarly 5K thing, and the hi-hats just dive into that. And so we always have to gate off the snare drum so tight to get rid of that hi-hat sound. It becomes a big job. So when you have mics that are giving us a more natural off-axis response to the hi-hat, then the hi-hat still sounds good in the snare drums. So when I turn up the snare drum, I turn up good sounding hi-hat, not crappy sounding hi-hat.
And you might even want to go completely without the hi-hat closed mic, because
Yeah,
you
that
have all
works
the
too.
hi-hat in the overheads and in the snare drum, and you have everything you want pretty much. Again, depending on the type of music that you're playing. But if we now listen to the hi-hat sound, we have just pointed it pretty much random. We don't know what it sounds like, so we want to hear it solo. So Rune, can you play the hi-hat, please? Sounds pretty cool, right? Can you turn it more towards the edge, just to illustrate what I said earlier about the low end on the edge? So you play it again. Is that noticeable? Like more low end?
And then you get that chuff. Well, I call it chuff.
Yeah.
A lot of times not desirable for me, but rather than using a high pass filter, which is a dangerous filter, I think, just moving it in like that, and we can brighten up. You can choose, if it's a garage band kind of sound, you want that chuffy hi-hat, great. You've got your choice. You're in control.
And you can even, if the garage band, if you want that really low end sound, you can even turn the hi-hat microphone upside down and mic the hi-hat underneath. With that Velcro, the universal holder that we're using on the 4099, we can put it on the actual hi-hat stand and lose one more microphone stand. So we're now down to only 2 microphone stands on the entire drum kit. And then picking up the hi-hat, the lower cymbal, which is normally heavier than the top cymbal, so it has a darker sound. So if you want more of that crunchy sound, that's could be a way of doing it. But only turn it back to where Ashley likes it in the middle, right there. So that's the hi-hat sound. And the snare drum in the hi-hat microphone sounds like this. Play just the snare. Listen to the hi-hat microphone. Even the snare sounds natural in the hi-hat microphone. So blending the snare drum microphone and the hi-hat microphone makes it just even more beautiful, because we have now some spacious sound around it. It's not like chunky and compressed and unnatural, basically. So that was the hi-hat and that was the snare. Did we listen to the bottom snare solo? Maybe we don't have to. It sounds
like a bottom snare.
Yeah, there's nothing you can do. Well,
but I guess the only point to make with that is, like, it's always, I find it more and more important to get a bottom snare mic, because then you don't have to be cranking up the EQ on a top snare mic to get the bite out of it. If you have good in phase bottom snare, then you can just bring up the snares and get the bite and edge out of a snare drum without losing the impact or applying too much EQ. So it's an important mic. It's a great way to balance your snare drum sound out, of course.
Yeah, and every time you start EQing on the snare drum microphone, you will always EQ a bit on the hi-hat microphone as well, because we have this bleed between the 2 microphones. So stay away from the EQ from now on, and then just go to the microphone placement seminar and learn how to place microphones.
This is why drums are so hard. There's more mics on a drum kit than any other instrument, maybe besides the Philharmonic, the symphony orchestra, right? Exactly. So all these phase relationships and bleed from one instrument to another are just absolutely critical when it comes to recording drums. A lead vocal, it's 1 microphone. It's perfectly in phase, right? But when we get 14 mics on a drum kit with room mics and everything, it becomes a real big issue.
Yeah.
It's the hardest instrument to get right.
We are asking for phase problems. Yeah. We have 3 times as many microphones in that little glass booth there than we have in the rest of the container.
Drummers get it all.
Yeah. They're worth it.
It's all about you, baby.
Okay, in the kick drum, we also have a tiny little capsule, 5mm capsule, a Devote Core, a 4099 Core microphone. It's the same mic that we're using on the racks, on the hi-hat, on top snare, bottom snare, pretty much on all the drums except for the overheads and the inside kick. We'll come back to that. But in the hole, we have also that microphone. I have placed it with a little angle on it. Like, it's not pointing straight into the hole, because it has an interference tube. And if the air flow from that hole, from the beater through the hole, is filling up that interference tube with air pressure, the capsule, the diaphragm is saturated. microphones. Not that it will ever break the microphone, because you cannot break the microphone with sound pressure. Not these microphones anyway. They are so cool, you can't do that. You can't, it's really hard to make them distort because they handle 154 dB.
That's just stunning to me.
That's
you don't look at these things and think this can handle, machine gun fire.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
You don't think of that.
That's amazing to me. They just feel because they're so delicate on those little shock mounts, which is great because clipping them on drums like that, it's always like a big no-no because of the resonance from the vibrating drum itself. But these, there's none of that, so they become so easy to place in all these locations that you would have never thought to do it before because it would be impossible to get a microphone there. So.
And imagine that we had to go with 5-6 microphone stands in that little room there.
He'd be stuck.
Yeah, we wouldn't be able to breathe almost. But anyway, we have that tiny little capsule, and we fight a lot the assumption that you can't get low end out of a 5mm capsule. We have a lot of students heard from I don't know who that you need a big microphone to get low end. You need a microphone like this, and then you have low end. I don't know where they came from. Maybe because they think that it's the opposite of a speaker.
They think that size matters.
Yeah. I'm happy that it doesn't. I'm happy that these microphones, they can pick up low end. If you imagine the size of your eardrum, it's about 2-3 millimeters. It can pick up low end, right? So the same thing goes with a small diaphragm. It has nothing to do with size. The size does matter though, because the small diaphragm, they have a really, really fast transient response. If they're made right, they react really fast in transients, and that's what we're benefiting from on the snare drum. The really fast transients, the microphone, it picks up the transient, the fast burst of energy, and then it's back in place, it's ready to receive the next transient, the next little ghost note or whatever. If you're working with dynamic microphones, on the other hand, you have very slow moving thing. It's a diaphragm with a coil, moving coil, and a magnet. It's a really big, heavy system, and that really doesn't wake up until this third, the fifth, or whatever snare drum hit, or ghost note, or whatever. So fast-moving transients are our friends here, even on a kick drum with a lot of low end. So let's hear the solo the outer drum, Mike, the 4099 in the hole. Plenty of low end.
Plenty of low end. This was always that what I like to call rubbery low end. It's the resonance of the drum. It's the length of the kick drum. I think people get overly obsessed with the transient of we need the transient of a kick drum, but I think for me at least, I always obsess over the length of the note. It has a boom, Bonham is your guy, right? But having control and getting a great resonant note out of a kick drum is important, and it's very difficult to do with a mic just on the inside of the drum, I think.
We can. We also have the. Also have the inside.
Of course, got to have both.
I don't know what that sounds like acoustically, because I'm not going to put my ear down there. That would probably be the famous last words.
That would be bad.
It's not loud.
Yeah, right.
Famous last words. I like to move the microphone a bit further out. Again, because I don't want to put my ear down there and experiment with the sound. But I like to move it. I moved it 4 centimeters out, and then I want to listen to it again, and maybe compare the difference. And actually, you would have to be the judge of that. Did we have more low end or less low end?
Sorry, I'm just having a little. It's hard to see my screens with the sunlight coming in here, because I'm trying to press buttons. To me, it was almost less.
Good. Good. Then we know that the position before was better. If I didn't take the time to move the microphone, I wouldn't know if I could have something even closer to what I was going for. So now I know. So I'll put it back there. Actually, I'll do a third position. I'll put it inside the kick. So now the capsule is flush with the hole, with the skin. and the interference tube is inside and still angling, so we're not getting that air pressure. So that's the third position, and you would be the judge. Was the first position better than the second, the third?
I like that one better,
Good.
but I'd have to go back to the first to get an accurate judgment of which one's the actual best. That one definitely sounds better than the previous one.
So that was position number 3. Now we have position number 1 again. Hit it.
I have to say I like that position the best.
We'll leave it there, but we wouldn't know unless we tried the other two, right?
If I had to only use one microphone, position number 2, the one previous, I would use that. But since I know we're using 2 microphones, I like the woof out of this position because I know I'm going to add it to the other mic that's inside, that's got all the attack and everything. So I'm thinking in parts.
Good.
But if it was a jazz gig, let's say, and we got one mic, we're trying to go very natural, I would have chose the position before because it was sort of a nice balance of things.
Position number 3, actually.
Position number 3, yes.
Yeah. So we're back to position number 2 now.
Because it's rock and roll.
Rock and roll, and we will hear the microphone inside, as you just announced. That's a 2011. That's a twin diaphragm capsule. I don't want to go into what that is right now, but it's a super cool mic. It's inside, and we mounted in some of this foam here, so it's suspended inside, and there's nothing in the drum other than the microphone. It sounds like this.
I mean, that's good. It's a good, clear picture. I'm getting all the beater hit on the head and everything. Sounds great.
Everything is good.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are happy.
Yes.
Good. Let's play some toms. The mics should be away. Just yeah. We will start out far away from the skin. We probably won't end up there, but it's just to see what happens. Obviously, the levels, they will change a lot because we are now twice as far away from the drum as before. But what we would like to talk about again is the sound, the sonic qualities of the entire drum, not just the position on the skin where we're picking it up, where we're pointing it at. And if you play the toms and you also play the cymbals, we will hear the natural sound of the cymbals in the rack tom and the floor tom mic. That was just the 2 tom mics, right? It sounded almost like very nice pair of overheads.
Yeah, it's just toms. Like toms clear. You know, so many times with tom-toms you get close and you really need to fight some of the lower tone resonances. They can build up. And with these mics, it's just much more of a natural sound. I just don't feel like I'm having to fight things with EQ. I mean, we're not EQing right now, just to be clear. But I don't sense a fight later in the mix where I'm going to have to like clean up resonances and balance things out. Now, granted, we have a good sounding drum kit and you have to start with the source. Let the source be your guide.
So if the source is good, then it's easy to with good microphones, just to pick up whatever you put in front of it. It could be an upright bass, it could be a singer, guitar player, whatever. In this case, it's 2 toms. Ashley is using also lower underneath the floor tom.
On the floor tom, yeah. I find I get better resonance, just size on the floor tom with 2 mics. It gives me more control.
Right now, they are, if you can close in on the bottom mic there, we will see that they have the same distance to the upper and the lower skin, about 10 centimeters. That's 3 inches for you guys. So, and they sound like this, and maybe you can just have the lower microphone first and then add the top microphone, and then we can play with the placement. And you can let me know if you want it closer or further away.
Okay, let's hear 'em. Okay, so let's try moving them in now.
Yeah, we'll move them in, both of them.
Sure.
I'll move both of them in so they're about 5 centimeters away. I don't know what that is.
Okay.
3, 2 inches. So they are closer, both of them, and they will obviously have more level, but the sound should change as well.
That's much more full-bodied for me.
Good.
Absolutely.
Let's leave them there.
Yeah.
And the rack tom, maybe you can just do that. Only pull that closer as well. Do the same thing, point it towards the middle. Yeah, so we get low end and level.
Can you try backing the high tom one off a centimeter just a little bit? It might have been that we were just picking up a little too much of the overtones. There, just being that close.
Or it could just be that you were pointing it too much to the center. So to maybe back a little and then more like, yeah, like that.
Sure, give it a go. Yes, no weirdness, all good.
Good. And so best of both worlds, we got the level,
Yep.
and we got rid of that weird overtones.
Yes.
So that's pretty much it. We have covered all the mics, right? Something that we forgot to talk about? I guess not.
The room mic.
Well, we started with the room mic, but we didn't listen to it.
We didn't listen to the. Well, we did. No, we did. We did listen to it a little bit.
Did we?
A little bit.
Someone knocked it over.
Let's listen to it again.
It is an Omni microphone, so it doesn't really matter. But yeah, let's have it in the same position and listen to it again. Awesome.
That's my favorite microphone.
In the whole world.
I love that microphone.
It is a fantastic all-around microphone. If you can get away with using Omni microphones, that microphone is the best. It's a killer microphone. It can handle sound pressure levels like, you don't believe it, 160 dB something. Really, really loud. That preamp we're using today on that one has a little attenuator, 20 dB. If you have a console that is maybe not handling high SPL so much, then you can just attenuate the output of the microphone. So
yes, the DADs are very sensitive pre's.
No, and they can handle.
Well, they can, but it's nice to have the range of control.
Yeah, yeah, but they're not the problem here. So let's hear everything again, and then thank you everybody, and I hope that you enjoyed what you just saw, and maybe you learned a tip and a trick or two. If not, I'm sorry for wasting your time.
And let the source be with you.
The source be with you.